Hey, what's up guys? TubaSteve here for DeucesCrack.com, coming at you with episode 6 of Road to Robusto No Limit Edition. And today we're going to be playing two tables of 50 NL on full tilt. So we're moving up from 25 to 50, which I know a lot of you guys will be interested in seeing this, because at 50 NL we do start to face a bit more aggression. The regs tend to be a little bit better, but they're still making lots of mistakes, and so the general way I'm going to be playing today is going to be very similar to the way I played in the last couple videos. I do expect, however, that a couple things might be different. I think the main one being that I will probably be finding a few more spots to try, some light 3-betting. I expect that I'll probably be getting 3-bet a lot myself. So here with A7 early on, since this guy limped in, if you've seen my other videos, you know I like to play pretty aggro here, and A7 is kind of, on the low side of the hands that I would like to open with. But I like getting in early and seeing what these sort of shorty guys are up to when they limp. And A7 should have pretty good equity against his limping range. So at this point I'm just going to bet, $5 should be plenty here to get some value here. It's a pretty draw-heavy board. So my plan here, once this guy calls, and I'm going to call with 9-10 and see a flop, probably plan to check raise a lot of boards. This board I'm going to check call, though. Anyway, with this hand, I'm going to go ahead and bet again, and I'm going to check behind on the river just to try to get a lot of value from draws. There's not a whole lot of worse aces that are going to call here, but there are some draws. He can have King X. I think my hand is still good here the vast majority of the time, so I'm going to bet. With 9-10 here now, there's no reason to raise. We have top pair, and we're not really ever going to get him to call it off with worse. So now I'm deciding whether or not I want to lead or check. I think I'm going to check again, though. I don't really think if I come out leading, he's going to give me a ton of action here. Now that's a really good card, because if he has ace-king, it's going to be kind of tough for him not to call. Or king-queen, or anything like that. So I'm going to bet, let's go with 5 here, even. I don't want to bet too big here, but if I bet kind of small, if he has I don't want to bet too big here and blow him off the hand, because I easily can represent a 9 there, but if he does have a king, I think he's going to call a reasonable sized bet. And I don't think that when he checks his turn, he's playing on folding if he does have some sort of made hand. So I like to try to go for some value. And we isolated a fish here, and we're just going to c-bet. I'm going to c-bet 3. It's not huge, but this board is very dry, and I expect him to fold with just about anything that whiffed except any sort of flush draw here. He's going to call with some pairs, and certainly he could have limped with 3x. Now when he comes out raising here, I'm going to go ahead and make a note on him just because I'm not really sure what he's going to check raise with here. So use my time to time bank and make the note. And fold. So I'm going to definitely be on the lookout for this guy to see if he's check raising me a decent amount. If he is, then I'm going to have to change up my strategy a little bit by either c-betting less against him or being more willing to continue lightly when he check raises. Here on table 1, Queen 8 in the cutoff is not a standard open, really, but we have a nitty player over a few hands. I'm not sure where these hands came from, but since it's 165, I have to assume that I played with him somewhere. Okay, so when this guy leads out, it's usually a fairly weak hand, but he could still definitely be doing it with a king. He could be doing it with a draw as well. That said, these donk bets are often air, and so our normal play is usually to raise these bets, but given that we have a hand with some showdown value, and we have the board kind of crushed if he does have air, if he has an ace, he might have some equity, but that's about it. So this is a pretty weird spot. He just comes out betting pot. I don't really think a flush is a huge part of his range. I think he can easily have a king. I'm just going to get it in here. I think he can show up with a lot of stuff, given that he looks kind of bad. He's short. Okay, so he folds to the shove. Not super... I'm kind of surprised he folded to the shove, but I'm not surprised to see that he had a kind of a weak hand there. So this is the kind of guy that's kind of just screwing around, making, kind of weird plays that don't make sense. So, So I decided to shove there just because if he does have a draw, like a 1-spade type of hand, or, with a pair, I think he's definitely going to call it off given the pot odds. I also think if he has a king, he's going to call it off, and there are some cards that could come to make the board kind of gross. So I definitely like shoving there. And here with our combo draw, I'm going to bet 225. I would normally bet a little smaller here, but I like to kind of juice up this pot in case I hit, given that I have such a huge draw. Now I pick up an open-ender, and it's kind of tempting to want to bet again here, but I think that I'm kind of behind a fair amount of, pretty much all of his range actually if I bet and he calls. Something to be worried about here is that he could easily have a higher flush draw than me, and now that I have this open-ender, I'm just going to check back and hope to hit it. So this guy limped in, and I decided to raise with Queen 7 suited, which I think you should pretty much be raising any two, and then on this flop we don't have to bet too big. It's very dry. Going to be an interesting decision here on table 1, but on table 2, I think now that he's bet into me, I just have 5 high. I'm not going to try to bluff him or anything. I'm okay with letting this pot go. He's going to have an ace here a lot, even if he is also going to have a flush draw. Now, on a 9-9 jack board, I think there's a really good chance he'd be slow playing, and also a really good chance that he's just not going to fold a pair or anything, so I'm going to check back and hope to hit my backdoor draw. And obviously that's a great card, and if he bets here, I'm going to be trying to raise pretty large, I think. So a pot size raise is 28.50. I'm definitely getting it in here, and if he does happen to show me a boat or something like that, that's just whatever. But I'm going to raise it to 23 here. If he has a 9, he's not going to fold. If he has a jack, it's going to be tough for him to fold. If he has ace-jack as well. Actually, if he shoves here, it might be kind of gross. I was just looking at the stack size. It's a little bit deeper than I thought. So he did fold. And I mean, I'm not going to try to not get value from a fish in that spot. But they are capable of making laydowns sometimes, and the thing you have to realize is that while they start out, capable of making laydowns, when they sense aggression, they don't adjust by, re-bluffing, and I mentioned this before in another video, I believe, but, again, he's not going to adjust by re-bluffing. He's going to adjust by just never folding, and so, I suspect he probably just had a misdraw there or something like that anyway if he folded, or maybe he was going to bet, a jack or ace-x of clubs or something like that, but, still, I definitely think that we definitely have to raise, and so I like a pretty large raise in case he does have a 9 or something like that. I'm going to get 3-bet with Queen Jack out of position. Our only play here is to either 4-bet or fold, and there's no reason to 4-bet bluff given that it's the first time we've really seen this guy do anything. I open that hand in the middle position just because I think that I am skilled enough to do so at these stakes, but you guys might want to try to play a little bit tighter in EP while you're learning. Okay, yeah, so we had a bunch of hands there right at the beginning. I'd like to thank you all again for tuning in. If you haven't already, this is or if you haven't seen it yet, this is Road to Robusto, where I'm basically rebuilding my roll, and we've made it up to 50 NL. I actually decided to do this video, you can see here, I'm a little bit shy of the full 1,000 that I wanted to have, but I did promise you guys a 50 NL video, and I think that my point here is that I'm trying to quickly build a roll, and so I don't really have to follow normal bankroll management. I have money besides this, so it's not like my rent money that I'm playing for here. And besides that, if I move down, I can easily have, 50, or, hold on a second, sorry, let me play this hand, I'll keep getting back to that. So here we're definitely c-betting with our gut shot on this board against, against anybody. I would c-bet this flop with your gut shot. A board like that, a lot of people don't like c-betting into fish, but you should have enough equity there when called. Because even in that spot, your opponent's calling range is not limited to just a jack there. They're going to call you with worse pairs, and so you actually have a bit more equity than you probably realize. So this guy limp calls. I'm not normally betting too large here because it's kind of dry, but since I'm out of position and I'm not confident that I can barrel this guy, I am going to bet a little bit larger here. This is actually, a fairly large bet, and I'm just going to sort of try this out a little bit during the video today to see if people will fold a little bit more tightly in position when I make a bigger bet. And so when he calls on this flop, it is very dry, but since I'm out of position, I don't think that I should try to barrel him. It's perfectly fine to just check fold now. This is a pretty interesting spot. I'm going to be really tempted to check call here if he bets, just because I think that most people are going to check behind mid pairs. Yeah, like that. So when he bets, I think he mostly is going to have a misdraw. or maybe some kind of queen that he checked back for pot control on the turn. So this guy limp raises me after limp calling a few times. And so he's going to be, trying to look to play back at me, so he's actually probably going to be the exception to my rule just then about people not wanting to play back at you too much. So I'm going to give him a yellow note. So somebody was asking me recently about my note-taking and color coding and whatnot, and I usually don't tend to focus too much on the color coding, especially when I'm playing micro stakes, and that's kind of a personal issue, because for me, I think that just about everybody that I'm playing against, and I hate, I try to be a pretty humble guy, but I do think that in a 50 NL game, I wouldn't be a 50 NL coach if I wasn't supremely confident in my abilities. So I do feel like I'm the best player at the table in just about any game I sit in, and so I don't really color code too much because everybody is usually just making pretty big mistakes. But this guy, when people do tend to play a little more aggressively, I will, I don't know, just for ease, I guess you can change it a bit. Here everybody's so tight that I want to raise 3-5 suited, but I don't think it's a great idea given the shorty, and so I'm just going to muck. And with King 8, this guy's been very tight and I don't have a read on him, so I'm not going to 3-bet him yet. If he played a few more hands, I might consider 3-betting there, and if I was suited, it would be a lot better to 3-bet with the King 8 there. But anyway, yeah, back to the bankroll management kind of stuff. You can see here that if I go on, so I've got about 900 in there total, I guess about 950 now. I can lose several buy-ins and still be doing pretty well. I can take a 4 or 5 buy-in shot and still have about 700 for 25 NL, which is close to 30 buy-ins. And so as long as you're flexible with your bankroll management, you can take some of these shots if you are very confident you're a good player and you're a proven winner in your stakes that you're trying to move along through. With King 10, I'm going to fold this. So far, the guys behind me have been relatively loose. This guy's kind of a fish. It's just not quite good enough of a situation, I don't think, on table 2. This is something that I mentioned before in other videos, I believe, and I mention it in the forums all the time, but one thing to realize is that when you move up to 50 NL, and people start 3-betting and check-raising and 2-barreling and stuff like that a bit more, a lot of guys want to adjust by 4-betting or, just generally doing a bunch of crazy stuff to counteract that. But what you have to realize is that before, people were being very, very exploitable, alright? They were letting you exploit them. And so now, when they suddenly just sort of act a bit more aggressive, and normally I would barrel an ace turn in a spot like this. There's just so many draws out there, and I have 10 high, so I don't think it's going to really be profitable. But really, when people start 3-betting more and all that kind of good stuff, it's usually not that they're playing so aggro that you now have profitable 4-bet spots. And oh wow, okay, so now I know he's calling with 5s, or with a bottom pair of 5s, so I'm going to start barreling him a lot. Yeah, so if I knew that 5-6 off was in his calling range on that flop, I would definitely bet that turn. And so this is just a great example of how you have to be thinking about this stuff while you're playing. You can't just be like, oh damn, he called me with bottom pair, what a fish. You have to react to that and adjust and realize that, well, if he's calling you on the flop with bottom pair, he's going to have a really weak range and he very well may fold to a turn bet. Now, if you try to barrel him on the turn and he doesn't fold, okay, you've got that information, so now you just start value betting it, right? But we always have to be thinking of what the correct way to adjust to our players, or the other players is, rather than just sitting there and waiting for aces, Oh yes, well back to my point about 3-betting. Yeah, it's usually not that they're, becoming more exploitable, it's actually that they're becoming less exploitable. And so if you're going to try to start 4-betting and stuff like that, you're really just going to be putting money in spots where your bluff doesn't work a high enough percentage of the time. And actually, it's very interesting because this fundamentally comes down to balance, A 25 NL player who's 3-betting like 3% has a very unbalanced range, and it's almost all nut-type hands, and it makes it very easy to play against them. But then when a guy starts 3-betting more like 5 or 6%, he's not actually adding that many hands, but he's much, much more difficult to play against, So, I'm a bit skeptical about floating here or anything because of his bet size. Tricky spot. I definitely think there could be some merit to a call, but I'm not entirely sure what my post-flop plan is going to be against this guy, so I'm going to fold for now. But this is a hand that I would definitely like to maybe get some discussion on in the forum. Perhaps I'll be able to analyze it a bit more later on. So we've got some heads-up action here. I see no reason to leave. He looks like a pretty good spot, so unless the commentary gets to be too much, I'll just keep playing this guy until some other people sit. Get you guys a little bit of heads-up action too. Should be, a pretty good board to c-bet just because he's going to have to fold any hand that doesn't have a pair or a spade, which should be a pretty large percent of his range. See, now my heads-up ignorance is going to start to show here. I'm pretty sure we shouldn't be defending a hand like this, but I'm not a heads-up specialist. I just think that we should definitely be trying to take advantage of these spots. And so, given that, I probably shouldn't be... Okay, he's sitting out anyway. I was about to say, given that I wanted to play just to give you guys a little bit of a feel, but I'm clearly not a heads-up expert, and so I'm not going to potentially make some mistakes for you guys to implement into your own games. That would be bad. So let's see, we got a table here that appears to have one shorty, and we have position on him. Let's see if we can do a little better than that. There's another table with shorties. I guess you guys couldn't see that, it was off screen. No matter. Alright, let's try this one. So it looks like we've got all full stacks here. One guy on our left with 40, so he's probably not the greatest player. He's sitting with 40, so it's kind of close to a full stack, but given that he's not on a full stack at all, it really doesn't matter too much how far below he is, just because he could have, started with $10 and ran this up, or he could have started with 50 and be down. It's just kind of hard to say, so we'll definitely be on the lookout for him to be a weaker player. But, can't really generalize too much with somebody that has, 80-ish BBs. I do want to apologize for the delay in getting this video out. Been pretty busy recently, and I did not plan ahead, unfortunately, and when it came time to record this, I was just so exhausted, and I didn't want to put out a subpar product. So I appreciate your guys' patience. I appreciate Rusty for dealing with me all these weeks. I know dealing with poker players when it comes to deadlines is not the easiest thing in the world. It requires some patience. So just thank you all very much, and I hope you enjoyed today's video or the remainder of it. Well, hell, I hope you enjoy all of it. But yeah. Alright, yo. I don't know why I said yo, but since he's the weakest player at the table, at least based on the assumptions we're making so far, I am going to go ahead and just, 3-barrel here. I probably could bet a little bigger, but I really don't want to just come out betting full pot without a little bit of history against him, because if he is a decent hand reader, he can realize that we'd probably bet smaller with a worse hand. So we're just going to keep betting. If he raises us, it's going to be pretty gross, except on that card, of course. So now what I'm actually considering is checking to induce a bluff from this player. In microgames, it's not really what our main focus should be. So actually, let's bet and see what he does. If he folds, though, I'm going to have to strongly consider checking to induce in these spots in the river, because a flush draw makes a ton of sense there. Alright, so we flatted ace-7 suited in a multi-way pot here. We could have 3-bet, but I decided to play it a little bit more cautiously for now. It looks like both people that we're in the pot with are going to be kind of bad, so 3-betting has a lot more value if you're squeezing better players that aren't going to pay you off post-flop. And ace-7 suited is actually a pretty good hand to do it with, because you have an ace blocker, you're suited, so you can stay aggressive on flops where you hit draws, and occasionally, the backdoor draw will come through for you in the clutch, I guess. So, wouldn't have been a bad spot to squeeze, but I think calling is probably slightly better. I definitely could be convinced that squeezing is better, by the way, because I used to think that flat calling with, ace-jack and king-queen in similar spots where it wasn't a squeeze necessarily, but say heads up against somebody with a lighter button range, I used to think that calling there was better to sort of keep in their weak hands, and then I realized that we actually make a lot more money because of our fold equity if we decide to 3-bet. Even though, you fold out hands that we're beating, it doesn't really matter because you're not going to make a ton of money off, his overall range anyway when you're flat calling out of position. Unless he's just really, really exploitable in some sense. Like if he c-bets 100% of flops, you can probably rather, call and check raise any flop and make more money that way. But, these are the sort of things we always need to be thinking about, is how can we properly adjust to a tendency that our opponent has in order to make the most possible money off of him. And we have to realize that becoming a great player as opposed to a good or just a mediocre winning player doesn't just involve looking for plus EV situations, but the most plus EV situation. And so now, there's all sorts of great tools like Poker Razor, and obviously, PokerStove has been around for a long time. But Poker Razor is amazing. If you guys haven't used it yet, I would strongly encourage playing around with it. I'm not going to lie, I have not actually been able to run a successful simulation with it, but I think all of the spots that I've tried to simulate have been a little bit too complex, and I need to kind of start. I guess we need a baby steps for Poker Razor or something, But yeah, so here with Jack 10 suited on the button, I'm definitely going to call here and see a flop. I would love for this pot to get multi-way. If we were deeper, 3-betting would be good, or could be good, because a hand like Jack 10 is just going to do so well post-flop. Now, I don't like that Wandering Queen checked the flop, just because I think that if he checks the flop, he's giving up. But I'm definitely going to bet it hard here and try to get value from the other guy. And they're both going to fold probably, but that's okay. I really hope he check raises or something crazy. Oh, of course the 10 has to come. I'm just going to keep betting this hard. I expect to have the best hand here. Obviously, I only lose to ace-jack at this point. And if he does have like a set or, something like... I'm trying to think what he would check call with here. It's actually going to be pretty gross if he raises me. Because, God. Because, ace-jack makes a ton of sense for him to check call with here. Or maybe, queen-jack or something like that. I mean, I can't fold. And now that's just an especially gross card. Yikes. The thing is, if he shoves here... Man. So, I'm calling here getting about 3-1, or if I call it's a little bit better than 3-1. I need to have 23-ish% equity or something like that. And I'm basically calling this to chop. I don't think he check raised with a boat, so I really only lose to ace-jack. I'm going to call. Okay. Yeah, okay, so basically on the turn, when he check raises me, I really doubt that he has any hand that now has a boat on the river. which means when he makes this river bet here, I'm only losing to ace-jack, and so he therefore then also has to have check-called on that flop with ace-jack in a three-way pot on a flush draw board, which I kind of just think, it's way too tough to put him on that hand, and only that hand. And since I don't think he ever check raises the turn with two pair or a set, my hand should be good enough to call for the chop there. But I would have to do some math to confirm that. But that's my logic. Pretty fun hand. Alright, this is an awesome spot where I'm going to slow play because I flatted this guy because I thought his under the gun range would be really, really strong. And now I'm going to just keep flatting and hope that he tries to value bet me with his big pair. And wow, that's a good and a bad card, just because having quads is always nice, and it might even be the first time I've had quads in a video, I don't recall, but I don't expect to be able to get a ton of value from him now. So I'm going to check, and I'm going to bet the river. Now the size is kind of what I'm wondering about, actually. I'm not sure, how big I can bet to get a call from, ace high or even aces, right? So I'm going to bet kind of small, make it look like I'm trying to go for some thin value. Hopefully he'll call and just cry pot odds. Oh wow, so he called with king high, so I guess my bet size is pretty good if it gets him to call with king high. I'm not really sure what he's putting me on there, but my range should be pretty narrow there, so I can see kind of why he wants to call, because I'm not repping much, but it still, it doesn't... What is he actually beating that I called with on the flop and I'm now betting the river? The only thing would be like a counterfeited pair, but I probably would have bet the turn with that, so yeah, his call on the river is pretty bad, I think, but now I'm definitely going to make a note on him that he saw me. That he saw me like super slow play that hand. Ooh, weird spot. Getting 4.5 to 1 with 4-6. He's short, but I think we have to call just to try to flop a draw. Or like two pair or something like that, and get away on really, really anything but really good flops. I could be convinced that that's a fold though, given his short stack size and the fact that we're really not going to make a huge hand that often. At this point, I'm not going to continue. When he min-re-raises, it's very likely that he has like aces or something like that. We don't have odds to call for implied. To try to hit trips or two pair, and even if he does have ace-king or something like that, he's probably going to keep betting at least a lot of the time because these fish like to just sort of shit their stacks in. So, I don't know what his range is pre-flop, and so I can't really justify making a flop call because I don't know how he's going to be playing those, different parts of his range later on. If I knew that he was going to just, like, keep betting with ace-king, I would probably just, like, call and try to call it off. Like on a later street. So I'm always worried that we're going to get good spots in these videos, but can't say I've been disappointed yet. With ace-jack, maybe I could have potted it here just because everybody behind me is sort of bad. But since I'm going to be sealing a lot in the cutoff, my standard is definitely 3x raise. And at this point I'm betting, mostly just to protect my hand. In a three-way pot I think my hand is good, but I don't really want to check to try to take it to showdown. I think I still could get people to fold some pairs. I could get value from draws, so I think that this is a pretty mandatory spot to bet. And I'm going to bet here with the 10-8 now, just because I think I have the best hand, and it's pretty similar, value protection. No reason to check here, and if we check and he bets, it just kind of puts us in a gross spot for the rest of the hand. And if we're taking the initiative, then we know that we know he's going to fold often enough for betting to be profitable. We're not really sure if it's going to be profitable for check calling to be a good idea or not. So I think there's a lot of money to be made in stabbing at those limp pots. You have to consider your average win rate nowadays, for a winning player is probably something like, 4 PTBB or something like that. And that's 4/100ths of a BB every hand, right? And so if you can just pick up a couple of those limp pots in spots where it's, supremely likely that your opponent missed, which really in any given spot, with his unpaired hands, he's only going to hit the flop about 1/3 of the time. So as long as the board's not too connected, or the guy's not too loose, you can take a lot of stabs at limp pots. Especially if you have, a gut shot or something with some equity. I'm going to 3-bet him here just because the min raise, especially under the gun, I perceive to be weak most of the time. Yeah, he insta-folds, so... I actually think that he could have misclicked or something like that there, like if he min-raised under the gun, just because that's kind of a weird play. You don't really see that ever from, tighter-looking guys. And he insta-folded, so it kind of makes me think he just made a mistake, but that's kind of speculation. So Jack-7 is clearly not a super monster hand or anything, but given that this guy on the button is so tight, we're basically treating this as if we are on the button ourselves. Wow, we're running pretty good. Gotta say, it's always nice to run good in a video. So here a 3/4 pot c-bet should be fine. It's a relatively dry board, and this would sort of be our standard bet size. The guys we're playing against aren't amazing or anything, but I guess my point being there, we don't really need to worry about flexing our bet size or anything, but I just happen to think 3/4 is a pretty good bet size there for value and a pretty good bet size there if we were going to c-bet as a bluff. And I'm just going to try stealing from him rather, at every, really every possible opportunity until he plays back at me. Clearly Jack-6 off, nothing, but if there's 75 cents in the pot and I'm betting $1.25, it needs to work less than 2/3 of the time for it to be profitable. Now here I am going to go ahead and start trying a little bit of light 3-betting. I don't have, actually, okay, I'm going to call. Sorry, the big blind is pretty bad, and again, this is a hand that fares very well multi-way, so I'm going to call here. And if it gets heads up, I'm not, completely out of options. The guy's c-betting 100% so far, so I can float him in some spots, maybe bluff raise, and so we'll just have to see what comes out. So at this point, I am hoping that he checks. Since he bets, I'm not just going to fold this, but since he's c-betting 2 people, I am going to be very cautious. If he barrels, I'm almost certainly folding unless I pick up equity. And of course, I pick up some equity, but it's probably not going to be enough to change my decision. So really my only play here would be to try to bluff. Let's see, if I call, there's going to be about 25 in there. And if I ship it, it's too much of an overbet. So we have a spot here where our leverage is not really at a good point to try to make a shove or something like that. But if he had 8 less dollars in his stack, I actually kind of like shipping if you think he's capable of folding a pair of aces. If he's capable of belugaing there. Because, you have a gut shot if called, you have a pair out if he just has ace-king or something like that, so yeah. Now here, when he leads into both of us, I'm going to fold this. It's kind of tight, but I'm not super confident on my outs being clean. We are a little deep, but I'm also not closing the action. And I prefer to play really tight in those spots to avoid making mistakes. Now, when I say to avoid making mistakes, it's not really to avoid making mistakes so much as it is because I don't think it's really going to be possible to play well and turn a huge profit in that spot, so So I elected to fold. You know, you guys might disagree with this fold, but I think that it's totally fine, and even if calling is plus EV, it's barely plus EV, I would think, given that you only have 6 clean outs, and it's three-way, you're not closing the action. You know, if somebody does have a draw and you hit on the turn, they have a redraw, so I'm fine folding here. I might have to go back and look at that action, actually, because I was a little distracted on the other hand. I don't know about you guys, but I really hate the new full tilt hand history. I wish they would just do it the old way, where you could see the whole stupid thing. So if there's a way to change that, let me know. Here again, you know, this guy's folding to 100% of steals so far. I'm going to make it 175 just to give myself a little bit better chances. He's a little looser than the other player. Oh wow, now this guy's min re-raising again. So maybe he's just a huge fish or something like that. I mean, I'm definitely going to call here and try to flop something. But I'm kind of surprised to see him min raising again. Is he going to min bet now? No, he pots it. Alright, so guys love to just sort of use the options available to him down here and forget about the slider. You know, you'll see that fairly often. I feel like somebody that that does that, where they like just either pot it or min bet. Now here, you know, betting is pretty thin, but I think that bad players in these games will call me with any sort of like one spade and all that kind of stuff, so I like betting. Now when he min raises, gosh, I'm just so bad at giving credit to min raises. I'm going to peel and see what he does on the turn. It's actually a pretty good turn. Now he just comes out potting it. At this point, you know, there's really not much I can do. He has to be pure total bluffing with just like ace-x. I really want to stack off though, just to see what he has. So he check min raise the flop, and then he just insta-pots the turn. Why do I want to think he's full of shit? Why do I really want to think he's full of shit? Okay, I'm going to calm down. You guys can berate me, but I really think he's full of shit. Yeah! Alright. So, I mean, you can see that I absolutely love to make huge calls, and the thing is there, if he had a flush, he would have to think about what he was going to do, you know? He wouldn't just insta-check min-raise, and then he wouldn't just, like, insta-pot the turn. You know, he would probably check-call the flop with a flush, if he's, you know, the kind of player that's willing to do this with air, you know, because they tend to play the hand the exact opposite of the way that they should, you know, so, really glad that I took a minute to think about that one, because his line, again, it's a spot where his line to me really just is totally inconsistent, and I think that, you know, he's just not repping anything. Ooh, with sixes on this flop, I don't have, see, I would rather have ace-king here if I'm going to bet, because at least then when I get called I have equity, so I'm going to check here, especially because this guy is short, and he might be stacking off with any pair of 8s or 7s. Now, when they both check, I am going to make a smallish bet. I don't think I need to bet very much here, because the chances that somebody hit a queen is actually pretty low, and I kind of want to just charge if there are some draws out there or overcards, protect my hand a little bit, and, you know, also get some value. Again, Jack-10 in the cutoff, or excuse me, not the cutoff, the hijack, or middle position as most people probably call it these days, is not an amazing hand, but I've got this huge fish that I just stacked. See, now I should have paid attention again to the stack sizes, and that's often one of my tragic flaws, is I think more about the table conditions and a little bit less about the stack sizes. But, you know, that said, Jack-10 is actually not a bad hand against a short stack, because if they're calling with a wide range pre-flop, you know, I mentioned this in another video, but Jack-10 off actually is like a 55-45 favorite if the guy has some sort of like really wide, like 30-ish% limping or calling range or whatever, you know, so it's really not even too big of a deal if we have to see a flop against him. Alright, so this guy insta-called, and I think that that's pretty weak. I don't think that he has a pair that often unless it's a fairly low one, I actually kind of want to check and let this guy bet, because he's kind of aggro. I'm going to take a weird line here and see if if I can get him to bet for me. I'm basically making it look like I have big cards and I'm giving up. And he seems very aggro so far. You know, we don't have a lot of history, but, okay. So now I am going to raise, and I'm going to raise kind of small. And again, I think that I might be able to induce some kind of crazy weirdness. And if he does happen to show up with queens or better, I don't care. That's fine. Like, okay, so you flatted queens against me, and you stack me with an overpair. Yeah, I mean, so my hand is good here. The vast majority of the time. I'm actually going to make a weird bet. I mean, look at this board, right? It's so dry. Actually, no. See, if he has an ace, he's probably going to call a shove here, so... Aw, are you kidding? And I even hit the set on the river? Wow. So, I mean, his play there is totally awful. But what are you going to do? You know, I got him to put in a ton of money with ace-5, and then... I don't know. What do you want? I guarantee you he did not have pot odds to call there. Getting, assuming that he, you know, considering that he needs 9.5, or excuse me, 10.5 to 1 with just a gut shot. Now, granted, he has the ace too, but... And, yeah, you know, I mean, sometimes people make really awful calls and hit gut shots on you. What can you do? I'm going to bet this board because I don't think I have much showdown value, and I think I have a lot of fold equity. And, you know, you can see I'm still up a buy-in, so what you going to do? No biggie. My EV graph's going to look sweet. Of course, actually, my EV graph's going to show me getting in 2/3 of a stack, drawing dead, which is, again, one of the reasons why EV graphs suck. But, again, all you got to do is make the right decisions. And, you know, in that spot, I think I actually did get a bunch more money out of him. You know, if I know that he's calling me as lightly as ace-5 and that when I check that flop he's likely to take a stab, you know, I think my play is totally awesome there. You know, I should probably make a note on him. It's easy even for me to get a little bit caught up in the moment and forget to make a note, though. So, let's see. What's the... Wait, he min-raised? Oh, let me put his hand. I don't really even need to say what happens after the flop, but I think it's a little bit useful just because it gives you a bit of insight into his mindset. You know, he won a big pot off me now, so it's probably going to change the way he plays at least a little bit. With nines, we have a very standard flat call here, and on this flop, we have a very, very standard check call. He's going to be c-betting this with almost his whole range, but if we check raise, it's going to be very hard to get value, and so we should definitely check call. Now, on the turn, you know, it's going to be a relatively tough decision, but given that he's an unknown, I think that he's going to mostly just give up here. If he doesn't have an overpair, you know, he might bet a 10. Now, you know, it's actually, you know, Jack there is actually not a bad card for him to barrel, but I don't, you know, this is the first hand he's played, right, and so I don't have enough of a read on him yet to really call down in a spot like this. And you have to also consider that, like, even some of the worst hands that he's betting here are hands like ace-king, ace-queen, and king-queen that have a lot of equity against us. And even if they don't have a lot of equity, or, excuse me, even, you know, considering that, what am I trying to say, actually, here? Yeah, any ace, king, or queen is going to be such a bad card for us. We're really only super happy with a 9. I don't know, it's just not really a great spot to continue, especially since his Broadway's improved. Okay, so I raised king-jack from the small blind. I think that, you know, a big raise there is still, you know, a lot of people are a little bit worried about raising on a spot like that, but, you know, that's why you make kind of a big raise. And the thing is, you know, when you get called two ways and you get a flop like this, you don't have to continue. You know, you're not making, you're not like losing money by checking and giving up here. You're actually losing money if you try to c-bet into two people on this, flop, you know? Oh, wow, and so this guy limp called with aces. Yeah, see, he's just super tricky, and you can kind of see here how, as you move up, the fish tend to get a little bit more aggro, and one thing to realize is they just do the exact opposite of what you would expect a good player to do a lot of the time, you know? I mean, you can see so far, by the way, guys, that I've been 3-bet a few times, but nothing too crazy. Now, granted, you know, you look around and the stats aren't super high, but still, you know, you don't have to start 4-betting people. It's perfectly acceptable to just fold. You know, nobody's actually 3-bet me enough that I have to be worried about them specifically playing back. It's more just like I'm getting 3-bet by a couple of different people at the same time. And that's another thing that you got to realize is that, you know, you're going to feel like you're getting 3-bet a lot more because each person individually is 3-betting, you know, an extra 0.5% or something like that, but that really adds up, you know, across everybody that you're playing with. And so you know, we would say that on the margin, each person is not actually 3-betting that much more, but, you know, when you add it all together, it might feel like you're getting played back at quite a bit. So this guy is folding to 100% 3-bet so far, and I haven't really been 3-betting much, so I'm going to try it out. 8-9, you know, is not the greatest hand, but we're connected, and he's folded 100% so far, and he's a nit, and those guys tend to really just play very tightly, so a lot of people are a little worried about 3-betting nits, but his attempt to steal is still 27, you know? He, furthermore, he's folded to every 3-bet so far, which has only been 2 before mine, but still, I like to personally just go off whatever information I have, and then if it doesn't work, I adjust from there. And here, I'm going to bet a little over 2/3. I don't want him to float me or anything here, so I don't like betting too small. And I mean, if he's not going to make a move on me on that kind of board, I'm not saying I would expect him to 100% of the time, but I'm just saying if he's not going to make a move on me in a spot like that, he's probably not going to make too many moves at all. So I'm going to min raise here as a steal. I think it's definitely still profitable if he ever folds, you know, and if he doesn't. Again, 9-10, being that it is right next to 10-Jack, the equity is going to be very, very close to the same against his range, if not, you know, almost exactly the same. And so if Jack-10 is a raise there, 9-10 is a raise there too. And in fact, 10-8 is probably a raise there, and, you know, moving beyond 10-8 or so would probably be, you know, like Jack-8 is a little weaker just because you're not connected, but really encourage you guys to play around with PokerStove versus some ranges and just see, you know, how much of an edge do I have in a spot like this with this hand against this player, you know? Is it a big edge or is it a small edge? You know, I think it's, you know, very important to understand things like that in order to help you fix your own leaks and really just to sort of figure out where your bread and butter plays are so you can start making them more often. Alright, so I was going to get on another table, but we've been on here for about 50, so I think I'm going to call it a wrap after this table right here. Or excuse me, you know, once the blinds come around. Hopefully we'll get in at least a couple more hands. Well, I guess that's going to be pushing it, considering that we're on the button. So I didn't see how the action went down, but I'd be willing to bet that Holmes E14 has a pretty strong hand. Although he's pretty aggro, so maybe he's, I don't know, it's hard to say. I'll have to check out the action. too bad that there's no way to check the action on the current hand without enabling it in the lobby, or excuse me, in the chat, which then just makes it impossible to see when people are talking or whatever. Oh wow, just top pair. Well, I didn't see how the action went down, so I am a little surprised to see semi-large pots being played with top pair, though. Oh wow, that guy called down with bottom pair. So let's check that out. You know, this is the kind of thing where if we're not in a hand, we should still be paying attention and try to get reads. So, you know, the Holmesley guy opened under the gun with Queen 10, by the way, which is you know, very notable. And then, and this is sort of what you should be doing, you know. Ooh, I want to raise here, but this guy's too short. If he wasn't so short, I would isolate, though. Anyway, oh, okay, so this hand went down a lot more normally than I thought, but the guy raises pre-flop and just bets 3 streets with top pair. He bet kind of small on the turn, and he didn't stack his opponent. You know, so we can notice a few people making mistakes here. You know, the Holmesley guy didn't value bet big enough with his top pair on the turn here, and he bet too much on the flop. And then, you know, if he bet more like 12 or 11 on the turn, he could have shoved the river. And the guy, you know, this fish would have been getting even better, or, excuse me, not even better, because the guy bet pretty small on the river. But the fish would still be getting pretty good pot odds on the river. Now, granted, his pot odds on the turn would be worse, but there's no way in hell a fish is folding a pair and a flush draw on this turn for just about any amount, unless maybe you just shipped it. So, so yeah, he should definitely bet. And the other guy should probably not post, but once he does post, calling with ace-3 suited is actually not too bad, and his river call, though, is probably pretty bad. But yeah, you know, you can see we learn a lot about our opponents from this hand. Basically, you know, people say, how do you know what people are doing if you don't have any stats on them? Well, I only have 7 hands on this guy, but I already know he's a huge fish. I already have, you know, I have 40 hands on this guy, and I already have 2 notes on him, plus, you know, we see that he sucks at value betting. Or at least at bet sizing, right? So, I mean, there's 2 pretty big pieces of information that we got from looking at just one hand. And, you know, that has nothing to do with any of these stats, you know. So, in conclusion, I guess we'll wrap it up here, since it looks like I'm about to be in the big blind in a minute anyway. So, I'd like to thank you guys for watching. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or criticisms, hit me up. This was actually, and I meant to mention this at the beginning of the video, this was my inaugural session at 50NL. At least, you know, first time I played it in a while. So, I have to say, you know, in terms of analyzing how the games play, I mean, it's small sample size, only 2 tables, but it looks like there are some fish that are fairly aggro, willing to make some bluffs, willing to take some kind of crazy lines. So don't be, you know, if you're confident in your hand reading and something doesn't add up, don't be afraid to make a light call down, but just realize that if you get it wrong, you need to, you know, post that hand or talk to somebody and figure out why you got it wrong. Or even, you know, if that's not the case, see if they would have agreed with your play. Because granted, when I make a call like that, I'm not expecting to win it every time. You know, that'd be absurd. I'm expecting to win it often enough based on the pot odds. So, that said, you know, I could have clearly lost that hand, and it might have still been the correct play. The tough part is that when you lose, obviously if it works, you have some positive reinforcement that you're doing something correctly. When you do something wrong, you get negative reinforcement that tells you you're doing something incorrectly. Therefore, we have to look to other feedback mechanisms to evaluate our play, which would be other people that have also been playing and have the knowledge and the theoretical experience. And not just other people, but then also the math, you know, because the math doesn't lie. And as long as your assumptions about how somebody is playing are good, then the math is all you need to, you know, analyze the situation, at least, you know, for the most part. Now that said, your assumptions may not be good, but we can still use the math to figure out which assumptions are necessary for the play to be good. And so, when I do some poker stove analysis, I'm not just trying to figure out if I made a good play. I'm trying to figure out if I didn't make a good play, what has to change for it to be a good play. And that's really how you learn. So, I guess I'll close it out with those thoughts for you all. And so, tune in next week. We'll have some more 50NL action, and I'll try to get some hands in and give you guys a bit of an overall stats review as well. Although I can't make any promises because I got exams and stuff, unfortunately. Bad time of the year. But I'll do my best. And until next week, thank you all again for watching. This has been TubaSteve for DeucesCrack.com with Episode 6 of Road to Robusto, No Limit Edition. See you next week.